Good afternoon. How was lunch? I hope you didn't have too much of it. Any of you had curd rice? Research has shown that a combination of curd rice and my lecture is a cure for insomnia. So for 5 of you, I'll excuse you. Please don't snore too loudly. That's the only request I have. So MD calls me a while ago and says, listen, we have this CCOF forum, and so would you like to come and address? So I never say no. I have an uncle who had this famous postulation that never let ignorance come in the way of authoritativeness. Not knowing something about a subject is no reason why you can't address people who are steeped in it. For the reason that maybe the ignorance gives you an objective insight into your business, which, because you're part of the system, you would never spot. I'm only half kidding, because at one time, as MD mentioned, I've been in consulting. I used to head PricewaterhouseCoopers, not Hyderabad office, right here. I was the office managing partner. Then IBM bought us out, so I was briefly with them. But for the last nearly 12 years, I've been on my own. And part of it is consulting, part of it, in fact, a large part of it is executive coaching. So I have the pleasure of dealing with a lot of senior executives at close quarters. And so one understands a bit of the angst that they face. With your permission, I'm going to take this off. It's a tad warm in here. So I was just thinking about what could one speak about to people who, like I said, you're in the context, you're facing customers, solving situations, possibly facing flack, and dealing with a lot of people who help address customer issues. Right? That's your main job as the Chief Customer Officer. And one of the thoughts, I thought I'll add a little bit of background music. So one of the thoughts was to say, can we look at where this customer focus is going, or the customer service is sort of headed? And so that was the reason why I thought I would choose a topic called Ko-Vadi, right? Customer service, which is whither goest thou. Unfortunately, in an IT forum, I made a small spelling mistake. It came out as Ko-Vadais. So one of the guy in the audience, equally good sense of humor, said, may I have that as sambar and chutney, please? So I had to quickly go and change that. But where are we headed? And it's not, I'm not much of a crystal ball gazer, but obviously I have depended a lot on the collective wisdom of many other people. But what I thought I would do, just share, and of course make it interactive, because I'm just as keen on understanding from you what your daily context is. So with your permission, we'll just take a little bit of a peek at what seems to be some of the trends, right, in the whole area. And a lot of it, in all fairness, as you would expect, a lot of the research is done in the West, right? And therefore the context is essentially the West, which means much higher degree of automation, sophistication, customer maturity, all those trappings are there. But the way I see it, the gap between practices in the West and what we used to follow in India used to be 10 years, 5, 10, 15 years earlier, right? Technology, manufacturing, all that. That gap has narrowed considerably. So much so that an Apple iPhone is released in India before it is released in US, just because the sun rises here earlier than it does in US, right? But I mean, they really narrowed that. So some of the trends are obviously centric to the people who happen to be in that kind of a context, but the day is not very far off when that's going to hit your ops as well. How many of you are working with multinational companies for multinational clients?
I worked before.
That's fine, it still lingers in your memory, so that's okay. Right, and therefore, would there be validity in what I'm saying, that the practices that we are following here, the level of maturity of those practices has caught up pretty much? It's not as if there is a separate one for India and a separate one for the international. And that's really what I see.
It's still a lot more industry dependent.
It is industry dependent, absolutely. Some of them are sunrise, well ahead of the curve. Some of them are blue collar. It's okay to, get by with this. And you're right. And the beautiful thing with life is it's uniformly distributed, isn't it? So all of us get a chance sometime or the other. Okay, so I thought I'll start by gauging from, there we are. just so that you understand and appreciate and empathize with the customers whom you're servicing. One simple question I have for you. Have you tried buying your own product or service?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's
From your own company?
yes.
Right. With that, is that with a view to finding out how the system works? All right. So that's part of your sort of sleuth work, right?
Whereas sometimes what we also do is we get people we know to buy,
Right.
because if you see our names, the radar goes up. So
Whereas it's a policy that you have to recharge by yourself, all employees of Tata Sky, so that you experience what the customer is experiencing
right.
and find out if there are any process gaps.
Excellent, excellent. Because that's the best way to find out. It's easy for us to sit in our ivory towers and preach, but what are the customers going through? And like I said, that one thing it engenders is what we call empathy, exactly what Lalita ji is feeling in her shoes, right? Okay, that's nice. And
only for Tata Steel, Tata Jaguar also.
as a special case, you'll do a test drive for Tata Jaguar, right?
but in the bank, that's one, at least in our bank, this is something we encourage among all employees also, because
Right.
it's impossible to experience everything, because it's a bank. There are different
Sure.
channels, there are different products. So the same person may not want all the products, but every employee is encouraged to only take from the bank and give us feedback on
Right.
it.
And that's a wonderful way of discovering what
And we
the...
fixed so many things because our employees were able to come back and tell us. It's better than.
Sure. And that's the best feedback because it's real, live, it's
Yeah.
organic to you, and therefore you're likely to do a good job. So I can understand that. And so same thing, one is to try buying your product or service, but the other is actually having a service problem and trying to get it solved, especially when there is an IVR with 17 layers of embedded numbers, right, before you can actually get, and then the call drops. Does it happen to you? So it's something that we do face, and it's a frustration, but the truth is that is reality. It's one thing to blame the people for the call drop or whatever, but people calling from most areas who are looking for service are actually facing that, and therefore in a sense you are simulating that environment.
Less than a percent.
Less than a percent?
1.49%.
Brilliant. Now, see the beauty with that, when you give quote statistics and you say 23.67% of statistics are made up on the spot. The moment you have two decimal, I'm just kidding, 1.49, that's pretty good. So what, less than a percent, 1.5, anyone else? 1.7. So pretty much all of you have an idea of what it costs. Is there a metric stuff that you do? And is there a conscious effort to take it down from 1.7 or 1.49 downwards?
Every year.
Right. And do they link that downward movement with customer satisfaction?
Yes.
Both are driven independently.
Do you see the problem there? That somebody is after you because they want to lower costs, somebody else is after you because not customer satisfaction, customer delight, right? That's what you guys are in. And unfortunately, the two very often move in opposite directions. If I'm going to cut costs, something has got to give, and very often it's a
There's always
poor
pressure on calls per sub going down.
pressure on.
Calls per sub.
Okay,
down.
is going down.
Yeah, it has to go down, but then they say the customer delight has to go up.
Sure. That's what I'm saying. They move in opposite directions.
In AHT, there's a limitation.
Sure, sure. So those are some of the interesting milieu that you people are working in, right? And I fully appreciate that. So just quickly, if I were to ask one or two of you to volunteer and say, what is the problem that most bothers you, that you're faced with currently? What would that be on a customer dimension? Customer service, customer centricity.
One is definitely how do you make the last person at the grassroots level to remember to serve customers.
Remember the?
To remember to serve customers all the time.
Okay. Any others? Oh, delightful. You guys don't have problems, do you? Can I join your company? Your companies? Surely there's something that you're bothered with, you're trying to improve, you're trying to change in the context that you are in.
Stakeholder support is a...
Can you elaborate that?
So when you're trying to move something within the setup, it is going to impact some division in some way, and you'll have to carry all of it along and make sure that, and at the same time, make sure that it is impactful for customers as well.
Carrying the stakeholders, it's tough because again, different people have differing pulls and pressures. They are evaluated on different parameters, and how do you carry all of them? Neela?
Sharing the vision vision of customer service in an outsourced environment. So basically, I work for Make My Trip. A lot of our customer service is actually outsourced to different partners across cities. Something that I feel really is that it is difficult to bring our agents and even our partners on the same page when we talk about, best-in-class customer service.
Sure, sure.
Can't share the vision the way we want to.
Sure.
I can add a perspective to this.
Yes.
One of the biggest challenges is that the brand, which we position so well, create a big brand, it is delivered by the people who are paid the least in the organization. They are the call center agents, and they are the engineers who visit the customer house in a hardware servicing environment. And they are the least paid people, least trained, least paid.
And they are least connected
to the vision of the organization, because it doesn't ever reach them. They are so far away from what is taught in the
and if it reaches them, they don't really connect to it, and probably because they really need to connect their age. And there's a reason for them to stay emotionally connected to it.
Sure, sure. I agree with that. So you seem to have identified, you put your finger on a problem. What are you doing about it?
More training.
Because think about the power of this. There is an inverse proportionality between the impact that that person can make and the investment the company has made. You haven't trained them too much, you don't pay them too much, they're a necessary cog in the wheel.
Attrition is very high.
Attrition is high, and very often you recruit because of convenience rather than skill. Right? You're hoping that you'll make up by taking them on board. Whole lot of things. And therefore, your brand, your own organization's future, in a manner of speaking, is in the hands of people who are least or seemingly least appropriate to do that. And therefore, the amount of effort that is involved in actually making a difference at that.
Almost all industries have got it all wrong. All the top paid executives sit on the top and they know everything, and ground level they have zero clarity.
Sure.
They don't get any visibility on what, and maybe a little bit of recognition here and there. Which is
sure. And they're the people who control the budget but don't do anything. Incidentally, if you ever thought about it, that's why the bottleneck is at the top. If you see a bottle, the bottleneck is always at the top, because a very pictorial depiction of senior management cut out from ground reality and looking at what it is.
You have other examples of the other extreme as well. Zappos, which
Sanjay I heard, right.
It's a great example where everyone, especially management, when they come on board, they need to spend time with the call center taking calls.
Yeah.
Absolute must.
But I have a slight difference of opinion here.
Yeah.
I don't think at the top we are cut off from the reality. We are very much aware and we are very much paid by that reality. I think it's the bottom which is cut off from the top reality. What the company is really trying to work towards.
So, it's all relative, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is obviously.
That a set of people feel that they know what's happening out there, and the people below actually have to make it happen. There is a disconnect. And therefore, pretty much all energy should really be going in ensuring. And you do that through experiential, right? Make the people sit at call centers, take the calls. In fact, I know US colleges offer a 1-credit course on handling irate customers. Customers, pardon the French, but pissed off at you. How do you still deal with them with a smile? And there's a very classic case of an elderly gentleman who was standing in queue waiting for his turn to come for ticketing in an airline queue. And so the guy in front of him is real louse, right? He's obviously had a bad day in office, shouting at this poor girl who's at the counter issuing the ticket. Why the hell are you taking so much time? Blah, blah, blah. And he goes on and on, berates her, finally gets the ticket and moves out. That lady has a smile on her face right through. So this elderly gentleman steps up, gives his ticket printout and wants a boarding pass. And he says, young lady, if I may say so, I thought you really handled that customer very well. I mean, there he seemed so pissed off with you. And yet you had a smile on your face. How do you do it? He says, sir, that customer is going to London, his luggage is going to Hong Kong. So there are courses on handling irate customers. But the whole point is connecting, right? And when you think about it, though you think of it as customer centricity or customer service and focus, making sure that the money is spent where it has maximum impact is really where the challenge is. Finance person will have other pulls and pressures, and the question is, how do you make sure that they see your point of view and help put the dollars where it matters most? And therefore, I work a lot with NGOs, and one of the things we are doing all the time is impact analysis. If I'm putting 100 rupees here and that's all I have, what impact am I going to make? Quantification of the benefits also become a problem. But those are interesting challenges that you're faced with. So, we've had a couple of illustrations of problems that you're faced with. So what I thought I would do is, since I'm just coming off this 3.5-hour lecture session in IIM Bangalore this morning, which happens to be on a topic called service strategy, right? And I just thought, with your permission, I'll take one slide from that lecture of mine, just for it to make an impact on you. If you've never stepped back and thought about it, why is customer service so difficult? How many of you have held other roles and then come into customer service? How nice, okay. And if you were to compare your current role with the other roles that you've done?
Yeah, very different, very, very challenging.
Right.
Much more challenging.
Why is that? Or what aspect do you find challenging?
The vast number of people you have to influence. I mean, it's influence without authority. So that's very tough.
So that's a tough task, isn't it? So I just put up that one slide just so that, sorry, you had a point to make?
No.
Just that one.
The biggest difference I found was everything depends on perception.
Right.
In my earlier roles, they were very number driven.
Right.
How much money did you make end of the day? How many did you convert and things like that.
Right.
But with customer experience, it's very difficult to actually metricize it in true sense of being able to capture emotions.
Right.
So you can't really prove that you've done something great because you made 3 people smile today.
You might feel convinced. The question is, how do you make the other person? And it's very interesting you should say that, because the very first aspect of why service is so difficult compared to maybe even the other roles that you played, they're not tangible. How do you know that you provided a better service today than yesterday? If I say I'm an automobile producer and I produce 5 cars today and I produced 3 yesterday, my productivity is up. There is something I can touch, feel, count, smell and say, yep. But when it comes to service, by very nature, it's intangible. And therefore, it becomes my point versus yours. You made a very valid point that perception could differ, right? And such of you who have also been in marketing will remember that old adage that perception is reality. So whatever the particular customer perceives, if they think you are God, you are God. And if whatever you do, if they think you're lousy, it's very difficult to change that. So that becomes your first challenge. So I just wanted to table this for you so that next time you feel like berating yourself, weigh it against the nature of the beast and look at what you could do differently rather than getting weighed down with seeming lack of penetration, success, convincing, whatever is the problem that you're facing. Yeah? The second one, very often we talk about, unlike, my favorite example is a mineral water bottle, right? I can manufacture it, I can put it in a supply chain, leave it in the shelf, and somebody can come and buy it at their convenience. I can manufacture, I have a chain, I put it, they can buy. In service, the service you're providing, your customer is at the other end of the phone. Inseparability. So both of you need to be on 2 ends of a transaction to consummate. If somebody wants to do a booking, room is not available, can I change? The customer, the dialogue has to take place 2 ends of the phone. And therefore scaling and so on also becomes an issue here because the customer has to be there. And because scaling is an issue, what we're going to see a little later is how automation is one way in which you can solve this problem. But this inseparability refers to the fact that a customer who is consuming your services at the other end of the line. And therefore, it's a real time, you don't have a chance to screw up. Any of you who is a theatre buff, histrionics, who's acted in plays and stuff, theatre? No? I assume then acting in movies would be even less. Because if you ask a person who's both a theatre and, if you notice, many people don't mix both. You're either a theatre person or you're a film Bollywood star. The reason is, in a film, I goof up, director says cut and I have a chance to retake. On theatre, I'm live, I'm in front of the audience, I have only one chance. If I fluff my lines, I screw up, right? That's what is happening in customer service. You have that one chance across the telephone line or your IT, whatever it is, and therefore this inseparability is just a point I wanted to remember. Third is the fact, you're talking about metrics. One of the intrinsic reasons why you find, you can metricize. I know MD used to do this in Dell and put in a whole slew of measures to see. You have to have a method of checking yourself, right, and making sure you're improving. But the reason why you find it difficult to metricize services, because very often it's us human beings who are providing service. So if I've got a machine which puts all the resistors together and churns out these computers one every 2 minutes, and if it's a Six Sigma company, it's almost flawless, right? Some 6 flaws per million. So it's almost flawless. But any of you fond of cooking? I'm sure most of you are. I am too, by the way. All right. So how many times do you find the same? Which is your favorite dish?
Mutton curry.
Mutton curry. I'm not sure if I should ask you, I'm a vegetarian. But nonetheless, if you've done it 3-4 times, is the taste uniformly similar? Yeah?
I take a lot of pride in it. It's
Brilliant.
a family recipe and it's consistent.
Good for you. Good for you. Make a vegetarian variant and I'll taste that. The point I wanted to make is if you ask anybody, whatever your favorite dish is, or if you've done it 5 times, how uniformly tasty or consistent is it? The answer is not always. Very difficult, right? There are, of course, 9 times out of 10 it's super, but there are those off days. Why? Because when you're providing service as a human being, there is an intrinsic inconsistency that has crept into it. I have my bad mood days, my good mood days, right? So it rubs off onto everything that we do. So the third, therefore, is inconsistency. And the last one, we've talked about it in the context of the mineral water, inventorizable. So if I made this bottle, I can make 100 of them, keep it and let the customers take it when they want, right? But if you're providing customer service, you're on the call because somebody has called you. You don't pick up the phone and say, can somebody call me now, right? You're responding, you're reacting. And therefore, again, what happens is, there is a certain perishability of that commodity, which in your case is time, right? It's like a seat on an aeroplane. If a plane takes off from Bangalore to Bombay with 2 seats empty, you have missed that revenue opportunity forever. Same thing happens here. If I'm a service representative, I'm waiting for a telephone call or waiting to answer, chat mode, as we'll see, is one of the popular things. If for half an hour nothing happens, you've lost half an hour of productive labor for good. If you happen to be a captive office, and therefore it's a sort of sunk cost, it doesn't matter. But if you make revenue only when you fix customers' problems, when you provide customer service, it's a lost opportunity. So the whole aspect of inventory is again something which for captive units versus for-profit units, there is a slight difference, but I just wanted to talk about that. Okay, having said that, I mentioned that I'll take some of these and talk about some examples that I might personally have been involved with, but the rest of it is, like I said, just taking a peek into the future. So let me ask you a question here. How many of you have really had an opportunity to step back and look at where am I headed at a professional, personal level? Wonderful. Good. What happened to the rest?
Thinking about? Yeah.
You're thinking about one day I will think about it, or you're actually thinking about it? Just a subtle difference. One day I'll get down to that, like the book I wanted to write but never will. Right? But the point I make is, now let me pose that question to you. Would it be a good idea for you to have stepped back and look at what am I doing? I'm caught in this thing. Could I do it differently? Could I do it better, more efficiently, have more fun, joy? Or do we allow ourselves to be caught up in that wheel and just spin along with it? Why is that important? Use this as an opportunity for somebody else who has stepped back to say, what is likely to happen? Out of these 10 trends, and there are 5 other takeaways after this, 1 or 2 or 3 of those may be relevant to the particular task that you are performing, role, the organization that you are with. And if you are able to do something with it, it's wonderful. I mean, I know MDs invest a lot of time and effort in this. You guys have flown from all over the place. It'll be very nice if you're able to take away 1 or 2 ideas which can make a measurable difference to whatever you're doing, then it would have been worth it for you to. Of course, there were 3 other lectures, so I'm not saying I'm the only one who arrogates knowledge to himself. But if there is 1 or 2 ideas that works for you, brilliant. Right? So just look for it, think about it. I've already copied into the little stick, so you can take it whenever you want. What I'm going to do is just quickly run through those 10 trends, as there are many out there. All of you, you know, what the current generation, and I mean you guys have, which we didn't while we were growing up. The difference is something called Google, right? If I wanted to do, I can tell you, for instance, I was in PwC from 92 to 2002. One of the most looked forward to publication of that was called Tech Forecast, right? People would love, they would come to a hotel like this, 500 of them would pay money to take the Tech Forecast away, because there was no publicly available information 10 years ago. Google wasn't as omnipresent and as easily available as it is today. Today, sitting at your desk, you can really, not all of them are authentic, I grant you that, right? You have to sift, but you have access to certain things which some of us didn't when we had a similar thing to perform earlier. But having said that, and I've just gone through half a dozen of these forecasts at least and looked at some of those that seem to make sense. So I'm just going to take that. One little caveat, this was in the Western context. A lot of it is IT, automation kind of centric, right? I don't know how much of that applies to you. Would any of you say that IT and automation kind of thing doesn't apply to your current role? That you're doing something which is manual that can't be? Fine, then that's, at least it's not completely deviant from whatever you do. Yeah. I'm just going to run through, like I said, and then each of this I have just a couple of bullets. I will not take you through all of them. MD, when do we stop?
Let's see.
3:30, 3:15?
Promise that we'll stop before 4.
Before, oh wow, that's a lot of time. We'll stop well before that. Mobile. So, like I said, each of these I'm going to put a slide, so just bear with it. It's good to know the top view. Self-service. This is an interesting one, Darwinian, and we'll understand why Darwin suddenly plays a role in customer service. Proactive, that's why I said a little earlier, reactive versus proactive. Customer, first, you know that. Smart machines, increasing levels of automation, not just automation in that sense, but machines, the artificial intelligence, the knowledge, everything that's packaging together is making a lot of difference. Rehumanizing care, that's a very interesting one, because people feel that they're talking to an automaton, right? So do you take a robot and give it a human voice? Do you take a human being and take the drudgery out? Is the challenge that people are faced with. Personalizing it. In certain examples, learning from the customer, not through second-hand but first-hand knowledge, and stored within a store, as we would call it. So that's an example there. Reaching out to customers in many different ways, but increasingly, especially with mobile and telephony, chat becoming important, and taking a little bit of future, the virtual reality, right, the VR. So all these are available, so don't bother jotting down word for word. Okay, so we're going to look at each of those and just take away a few, like I said, which I think is of relevance and interest to you. Depending on who you read, whether it is Forrester, whether it is someone else, 30 to 45% of the people around the world are going to have a smartphone within the next 5 years, right? So that's, now just think about it. Obviously, how many of you have 2 phones? 2 smartphones, there you go. So people like us skew that average, right? But when we say 42% of the population is likely to have a small, 2 out of 5 people in some manner or the other are going to have a smartphone, right? And if they're customers and consumers or whatever it is, they are potential audience for you to address. So that's a surprisingly large population penetration. We have to take it in a local context. When we used to talk about internet, you had to discount the internet penetration in India by a large mile. Airtel, were you the one from Airtel, man? Somebody from Tata Tele, Airtel?
Yeah, I worked with all those organizations.
You worked with all of them. If you were to stab a guess at percentage of people in India who will own a mobile phone, what would that be? Say 3 to 5 years time frame, if not current.
Should be around 70% at least.
What percent?
70%.
70%. How much of that do you think will be smartphone?
Smartphones would, to my mind, would be more limited to the urban.
Agreed. 10%, less than a quarter?
Should be.
Because what happens, urban, though penetration is very high, though the number as a population is low. So in Indian context, I would have hazarded a guess that 10 to 15% will be smartphone users right here.
One more statistic which I just read about a week ago is
Yeah.
that there is one smartphone being added every second in India.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, while that talks of the velocity of phone entry, it doesn't give me a sense of percentage. But we can do the math. I mean, it's a nice point.
Would a smartphone be available for you to purchase? Because the smartphones are available so cheap. I don't think the penetration would be as low as 10%. It could be anywhere between.
Take the point that if you look at 75% of our population lives in rural areas dependent on agriculture directly or indirectly. That is a statistic, right? So 25% of population is in urban areas such as us. And if out of us, I mean, if you take Bangalore as a city, yeah, today even the driver and so on have a mobile phone, I don't say no. But as a percentage of total population, give or take, you want to say 20, 25%, hey, I'm in a generous mood, we'll make it 25. But the point I'm saying is, it's nowhere near as prevalent as the West, but for such of you who have customers in India, right, and you're trying to provide service, the need for thinking, what is your, if you were to look at your current role, what is the most prevalent medium of providing service to a customer?
Voice.
Internet, voice. So those are the most prevalent. Now the beauty with that smartphone.
It's very different for here.
Yes.
It's very different for rural and urban again. The rural still prefers to walk down into a store, and then the partner calls, for resolution.
Sure.
They're more comfortable walking. Direct interaction is what they would prefer, while the urban, prefers the voice.
Sure. Sure.
And only the elite prefers the non-voice modes.
Absolutely, and therefore you find what is happening now is that the conversation is getting, if I may use that nice term, layered. Rural versus urban, right? Within that, nuances, people feeling comfortable. Many of the people who come from Belgaum and walk in Vittal Malya Road don't go into some of those shops for the fear that they may be charged an entrance fee if they go into Gucci shop and look at a bag. I kid you not. It is such a snazzy glass and brick building. They are worried that it's actually like an exhibition you may be charged if you go in. So there's a lot of those coming in. But the point I'm making is, amongst the customers that you have, some of you are voice oriented, some of you are internet oriented, and what that mobile phone has done is it has fused the two. Right? So you now have a two-in-one, and therefore your ability to reach that customer through either medium but one device. That is the sort of thing that is changing the, as Rajiv Gowda nicely said, changing the narrative. Right? So that's one interesting part. The other is the expanse of customer experience that is being brought into the fold of this. In fact, when we go to that last but one slide and look at some of those takeaways, one of them is people are becoming multi-channel, right? Your touch point with your customer could be internet in some cases, could be voice in some, it could be a mailer in a third. They're multi-channels. And the challenge you have today is, how do I gather all that together in one composite dashboard? Is that fair? And tomorrow, if the technology allows you to catch it across these multiple devices, you've got a killer. But for you, the challenge is, how do I know which customer I was dealing with through whom, and how do I ensure that I deliver the whole thing? So the whole idea is, can I bring them together and have one composite dashboard which helps me do everything? So if I'm booking Meru cab, I can do it through a computer in the evening. I can also do it through my app today, right? And why do you think people are forcing you to go towards apps, giving you incentive? Some companies go 100% app based. What do you think is behind that?
It's accessible and it becomes a habit for us to start using it. It's easily accessible.
Sure. So ease of access is one. So why not that as one additional method of easy access to customer instead of being the only access? And the reason is, it simplifies everything. What are you doing if you are a company that says, I'm going to be only app based, and some of the e-commerce vendors you know are, they are giving up the old brick and mortar clients, right? You're giving them up, but you are ring fencing a set of customers because now you own their soul, right? Once they are with you through the mobile, every touch point is visible to you. You know what they're doing, how much they're buying, what exactly they've bought. So that whole thing, I noticed in some of your past sessions, like Sandy, I think, spoke about analytics, right? So all that is happening. And that's the reason some people are willing to give up parts of businesses to make it convenient for them to deal with customers. And the reason for that is they want to provide their customers with the best possible experience so that you would never go back to your internet and book through another computer. You would always stay with them on this. This is what is.
And the e-commerce world is another reason for it. That you can't have bots automatically running and picking out price of your products.
Right.
So if it's mobile only, it kind of deters them.
So it's interesting that you're changing the behavior of customers, you're influencing them in certain ways, and today you are putting in more and more of your end-to-end experience of the customer into the device. Even today, many of these applications, I may go through the internet, finally I have to give my credit card number, change the whole thing through this. But a lot of mobile payments, your Paytm is a good example, I finish the transaction through my phone itself. I don't even worry about my 4-digit CVV beginning with 4 and that sort of thing. Right? You're changing the whole. So, mobility, what do you need to do for your business? What percentage of your current service providing is happening through the mobile business? Is that likely to change? There are two ways you can pose the question. Is that likely to change? Is reactive. Can I use mobility as a weapon, right? Is a possibility? Maybe you want to look at that. So that's the nice thing. But very clear trend where it's no more about West and us, or it's North and South. It's about prevalence, right? And the sheer number of, you're right, smartphones are becoming affordable, sheer numbers are becoming larger.
Ola has become app only now.
Ola has become app only. And today they're telling you don't pay through the wallet, right? Your e-wallet. So they're forcing more and more of your life towards that little device. The point is, old days like me may resist to some extent because we've come from a brick and mortar world, right? Real cash and that kind of thing. But the younger generation is taking to it like duck to water. We have heard a Prime Minister go and talk to, stand up in various international fora and talk about the 3D, right? You heard that famous speech of his. But when you really think about the so-called demographic dividend, right? And all of you are familiar with that term, right? Demographic dividend. Look at the age profile of the customers right here in India. If they are the ones that you're providing service to, if 2/3 of them are less than 25, 30, but next few years they'll be in the 25 age bracket. And they are people who are taking to mobility like a duck to water. What does it tell you?
That's the future.
That's the future. How many of you are proactively putting in place a mobility-based service, customer service, is the question you want to ask yourself, right? I'm not saying that's the only way, please. There are obviously other ways, many ways to skin a cat. But I'm just saying, if the trend seems to point towards that, should I not be strategizing today to move towards a preponderance of service being offered into a media which everybody seems to be moving into? That's what I wanted to leave. See the thought in your mind for you when you go back and start cracking the whip. Other very interesting development that has been happening insidiously, quietly over a period of time. Earlier you used to provide the service. Today I believe in efficient self-service. Think about that. Efficient self-service. How efficiently. ATMs are an absolutely good example of that. Some of you might remember how you would go to a bank to draw money, stand in one queue, give you a check, take a token. Go to another counter because that person is designated as a teller, and the second person is a cashier. Teller couldn't give money, cashier had to handle cash. Do you know why? Because the cashier was insured by the bank, teller was not, for handling cash. It was considered injurious to let crisp money go through your fingers. Then what happened with the automation and everything, with the change, mindset change, you have one window, you could go present a check, collect, even today, go to HDFC Bank, give you a check, collect cash from one window and go away, wasn't there earlier. But I still have to go to a branch. They are closed for half a day on Saturday, full day on Sunday or whatever. Inevitably, when you think about it, life is conspiring to make things difficult for us, the consumers, because when you have a problem and you want to go consult somebody, their hours are your working hours. So when you go home and you want to do something which is by way of solving a problem, they are closed for the day, right? too bad. But what an ATM, for instance, did is, in fact, if you remember, there was a nice coinage, anytime money. ATM was called anytime money. For the first time, we could go. But what have you done? Just think about it. If you are the bank, what have you done? You have shifted the onus of servicing the customer to himself or herself. So I go, I put in the card, I put in the PIN code, I collect the money and I come back. So it's
a lot of effort. I remember my first job when
yes.
I joined HDFC Bank. The first job they gave me was to act as concierge and move people to ATM. So I used to stand near the ATM and teach people how to use it.
Excellent.
I did it for 1 whole month. So it's a lot of effort to move a customer to a different channel.
And
training a customer.
Training the customer. See, so at the root cause of it, whether you like it or not, the single largest problem that all of us face when looking at customer service is a change of the mindset. It's change management. Very often in consulting, I used to tell my colleagues, you think you're doing a more efficient supply chain? Rubbish. You are actually managing change. Of course, you come out with all those nice models, you redesign, you do business process reengineering. That is the easier, fun part. The tough part is getting a customer to adopt, to change and to adopt to new ways of, including the way you provide service. Right? So the point therefore is, it's very interesting that customers are now beginning to learn that there is such a thing as self-service, the ATM example I gave you. And so for you the challenge is, how much of what I am doing today can I shift the onus of to the customer? Right? And so just a bit of analysis, the easier part, low-hanging fruit, as we heard the previous speaker tell us. So some portion of it can you actually push. And why are we doing all this? Don't forget, my capacity to service customers is limited, finite. And the more and more I can lop off, I have left with me an opportunity to service in a more efficient manner. Because the quantum of work to be done hasn't changed, right? In fact, if anything, it's growing. If your company is growing at 15%, your problems are growing at 15%. How many of you, if your business has grown at 15%, how many of you have a headcount increase of 15% allowed to you?
No way. The complaints increase threefold.
So that's very fair, isn't it, from a top management point of view? Because my top line has grown 15%, bottom line has grown 25%, shareholders reward me, I take my commission and go. But on the ground, there is a disconnect. And we are doing all this because we want to free up that little bit that you can to service your customers better. And a part of that is through the self-service.
Actually, I can give you an interesting example.
Go ahead.
IMPS is the new mode of transferring money. So in the recent past, maybe the last 6-8 months, you see a lot of banks pushing customers to use IMPS because it's very convenient. You don't need NEFT, you don't need RTGS, it works on holidays, and it's very, very effective for most transfers. So we did a lot of concentrated effort to move customers into the channel, but the resultant effect is, while there is a 70 to 80% increase in the channel usage, you have 3 times more complaints actually only in that channel called IMPS. So it's
where the onus is on the customer, isn't it?
Interesting. If the onus is on the customer, but see, customers have a tendency to come back and check whether it's happened or not.
Sure.
So there are small challenges that you face even in great technology like this. There is a problem with NPCI, but then and 98% go through, but still you will have complaints.
Sure.
So a channel usage naturally increases service.
Would you look at it as a permanent headache, or is it likely to be a spike at that point of time because of, and you would expect that because there's a mindset change you're causing. If, as and when the dust settles down and steady state conditions obtain, if you find overall the number of complaints have gone down, this channel was worth shifting. If not, you've added on another sort of head to your hydra, right? So that's the way to think about it. Now, the interesting thing here is, even though,
it's also, while you're trying to do this, for the first person it's extremely tough. When Citibank went to non-management, everything being online,
right,
it was tough for them. Moving the customer mindset, I remember having that Citibank account.
Right.
Initially I was like skeptical, but then I found it so convenient. Why aren't the other banks following it?
Right.
For the first mover it is tough, but then when it becomes a norm, they become the leaders.
Sure.
That's one part of it. The second one is, at think timing is also very critical. So to give you another example was Microsoft launched Windows 8. Right? It failed miserably, people didn't use it, blah blah blah. They said, all people wanted was the start menu. Everything else is fine, you can do whatever you want, just give me the start menu. They launched Windows 10, the take rate has been skyrocketed.
Sure.
So it's the same thing, they're doing the same thing, they're just moving you towards touch and feel and icons. Reinventing it again.
And there is one other small dimension in that, which is listening to the voice of the customer. Somebody somewhere said, the team that works, my son works with Microsoft in Seattle, and he was part of this Windows 10 team, and I know how many late nights they had and so on preparatory to the launch. So a lot of hard work went into Windows 8 as well. The reason it got debunked was because of customers' expectation versus what was actually there. And putting the little window at the bottom to say start, if all it took, why do you think they went to Windows 10 instead of Windows 9? Right? The idea is to make it look like they had a Windows 9 in the pipeline. I listen to my customer, I'm junking Windows 9, I'm giving you new improved Windows 10. Welcome to the real world of marketing. Right? So
already Windows 11, the threshold is just coming.
Sure, and this takes me to another point, which is the product obsolescence. Whatever service that you're providing today is largely around a product, right? It could be a financial product, it could be an automobile, it could be a telephone, whatever it is. The half-life of the product is becoming sharp. So as Windows 10 is being released, it's a different team working on Windows 11, which will both cannibalize into Windows 10 and sunset it. Very scary, because I'm working furiously on a product knowing that it comes with obsolescence built in. That's what is happening. So, but the point is, am I going to shy away? Earlier we thought we'll sell 11 in US and 10 in India. It's not going to happen anymore. So you have a different set of ball game there.
You're absolutely right with shelf life. September we launched 10, and now November, now this month,
right,
11 is already out.
That's because it's November, right? In December will you have 12 out is a question. I'm kidding. But the point is fast and furious. And all the more onus is placed on customer service because customers are still latching on to Windows 7 and Windows 8. They expect service. So I know many companies, especially product companies, where the earlier generation of product services from India and the current generation is from Germany or US or wherever it is. So India is a very convenient ground. EMC is a good example. I work a lot with them. Some of their earlier stacks are actually maintained only from it. Customer service is done only from India, right? Because they want to differentiate. But the interesting point is, even as we're going towards customer service, people still seem to derive comfort from talking to human beings. Okay, it's a very interesting dichotomy that in spite of a lot of automation or internet and whatever else, the number of people reaching out to a human voice, right, to get problems solved is much more than what is happening through self-service. So that's just an interesting thing, that even though we are shifting, there is still value in the old. So that's just a dichotomy, but you need to get on with that. When we talk of Darwinian customer, the reason why it's a very nice catchy phrase is that what is Charles Darwin famous for? Change. You adapt or you perish, right? So the whole thing about shift and adapting to nature or perishing is really at the heart of customer service as well. That there are new technologies, new customers, new demands. How do I embrace the new even when a part of me is supporting the old? Right, is really what you're faced with. And you have a choice. If you take Indian Airlines as an example, with all the changes that are happening around them, they were one of the best examples of an ostrich burying its head into the sand and saying this too will pass. Right? And I'll tell you visually how it struck me. Very recently, I'm standing in the first floor of an airport and I could see the ticket counters, booking counters at the bottom, right? And I'm seeing from top, the first 2 or 3 are like SpiceJet, Indigo. The next 7 or 8 of them are Jet Airways. And the next 6 are Indian Airlines, or Air India, sorry. There were possibly 3 or 4 people in the entire 6 or 7 counters for Air India. You could manage the crowd at Jet Airways and a reasonable number milling in SpiceJet and Indigo. Now, I don't have to be a marketing guru to say that is a very fine example of market share, right? And where was Air India or Indian Airlines in those days with giant share, right? And how they drove themselves into the ground. Why? Because they didn't adapt. The reason is different. It's a government-owned company. You don't expect them, you can't accuse them of being nimble-footed, right? So they didn't move at the speed at which the industry demanded. And of course, we have another example of Kingfisher Airlines, which moved too fast, right, and had a different fate. But the point is, no more is it an option to say, am I going to play ball by these new rules? It's not a question of whether, it's a question of when. And the faster you do it. So it's an interesting point that you made, and we call it as a pioneer, of course, like Citibank. You can also have an early mover advantage. So I can be the fast follower. I don't have to be the IBM chief executive once famously said, he started the PC, then 82 they discontinued, 84, 86 the IBM PC compatibles overtook IBM market share, IBM came back, right? And of course they did a fine job. So in one of the meetings he was asked, you missed that wave, didn't you? So he smiled and said, I don't have to be the first to be in a party to be the best dressed. So you can still be a little late and catch, right, that fast follow thing. But the point is, you better move. So the question for you then is, what are some of those tectonic shifts that are happening in your industry? Insurance, automobiles, banks, whatever it is, financial services. What are the shifts that are happening elsewhere, and what are you doing to catch up with it? Because the customers are going to move into every new service you provide, and therefore you have that headache of servicing more people. So that's really the main take from this. Yeah. It was especially on the back of the derivatives and so on, there was a collapse, right? You remember that, 2008. Sorry? So 2008, right? And the US government of all the, because you wouldn't expect a capitalist country to think like that, but they said these, and in fact it happened with automobile industries as well, right? And of course, Ford and General Motors took money and returned it very quickly, but the point was, the government said, you're too big to fail, let me bail you out. And fortunately, fortunes turned and they got the money back. But now, in the eyes of customer, no brand is too big to fail, right? If you don't provide me service, I'm going to equate you with the worst, and I'm going to vote with my feet. I'm going to opt out of your service and go to someone else. So the whole thing about that is adapt or perish. So that's the thought. And like I said, it's not supposed to sound as drastic or dramatic as the takeaway of, do I know where my particular industry is headed and what am I doing to hedge my bets, right? With the expectations that I'm setting up with my customers. The last one is interesting. Of the industries that were polled, 88% felt they were giving excellent experience, but when the customers were polled, they felt that only 8% of them were giving excellent experience. It's very interesting. Today morning, was my last lecture on this service strategy. So I just jokingly asked my class, there is a test I have to conduct, and I was telling them about it. So I said, I'll just be a little curious, all of you look so bright. How many of you do you think are in the top 20% of the class? And 80% of the class put up their hand. Right? So I said, wow, 80% of the class thinks they're in the top 20%, gives 80-20 a whole new meaning. But the truth is, we have a perception about yourself. If I asked you on a 1 to 10 scale, what do you think your customer, your view of the experience you're providing the customer or the customer service that you're providing, chances are you're going to move towards 8, 9, 10, right? And if the customer, however, thinks you're more like 5, 6, it's a wake-up call. And it's not enough to say that's a perception, because remember, perception is reality. So the whole thing, therefore, is part of it is, of course, staying in touch with the customers and asking them, but not allowing ourselves to think that we are doing a good job when it is not warranted or backed by facts, right? So that's a Darwinian part, that we either move along with the times or we're going to be left behind like the dodo. So that's one little point I wanted to make. So, and the last thing is, today, most of what we do, unless it translates into dollars, right, into actual tangible profits, nobody's, if you ask for an additional investment in your operation, you say, I want to provide the best experience to the customer, give me $1 million. How many of your board is going to approve and give it to you easily?
We have to prove it like nobody.
So you have to justify, you have to show an ROI, why is this better than opening the branch in Chandigarh we've been talking about for the last 6 months, etc., etc. So it has to be quantified. And the good news, if there is a corroborative evidence, companies that actually, or brands that actually assiduously follow delighting the customers have returned positive while those who felt it as a necessary evil have actually grown at -46. So you can see the double swing, right? One is at +20 odd and the other is -40 odd, which means there is a very direct correlation. And therefore, chances of getting the dollar is a little easier if you're able to try and prove that. The next thing is, in a lot of cases, it will be fair to say that I'm providing a customer service in terms of, for instance, addressing a complaint. Would that be fair? Most of your customer service, does it relate to problem solving or is it something different?
So even transactional service is service.
Fair enough. Transactional service is a part of your routine, bread and butter, so no issues there. So that's a genuine service you're providing. If you were to look at the customer service in terms of making a difference, right? And especially if you're looking at like customer support, oftentimes it's reactive because there is a problem and you're trying to fix it. The whole thing is moving towards prediction and proactiveness, right? Give you an example. It's very interesting, you know. They say that, do you know this? There is more electronics in your car today. If you open the hood of your car and look at the electronics that is there, which is driving the amount of fuel, temperature, AC and what have you, there is more computing power in the hood of your car than the mainframe of the 1970s. Can you imagine that? That what used to power whole corporations earlier, the power of a mainframe is actually reduced in size and fitted into your car. So what happens if organizations do it in a positive way? Ford got into trouble because they did this but without telling the customer. They put in electronics there to study your habit of accelerator, clutch, brake, handbrake, parking, etc., etc. But just imagine if you're a proactive company and you put this little device into your car and you say, I'm selling you this car, I give you a 1 year or 50,000 kilometer warranty, supposing that's a deal, right? Most companies give you some deal like that. How nice, now 1 year is fine because there is an invoice date and it's relatively easy, but if I'm doing a project in Pune, I'm driving every week, which happened to a friend of mine, you're going to burn up those 50,000 in next to no time. Somebody else who's based in Bangalore driving to office and back is going to take a long time for 50,000. But if I had that little chip in the car, which actually looks at how much I've used up of that 50,000, and supposing, or let's say 20,000 kilometers, and at the end of 7 months I've come to 20,000 kilometers. That can send an alert to your company. You call the customer and say, hey dude, which is what the customer service these days is about. Hey dude, your car is due for servicing. You say, what do you mean, 1 year? He says, no, 20,000, you have already done 19,800 kilometers. Are you with me? Yep. So I'm putting in electronics into a product in this case, because that's part of the service I'm offering, but I'm being proactive. Customer isn't even aware that it's due because how many of us, if I asked you what is the mileage you've done on your car, would you know? Very difficult for us to remember that I've done 90,800 kilometers in the 7 months, it can. So the whole thing is moving towards proactive, prediction based. Can I look at usage patterns and actually do something? This is again very interesting. It doesn't apply to all industries obviously, right? But if you're looking at some of the transactions, it could be a bank for instance, and of course this is slightly different because we are talking about analytics. If you find a customer has asked you to close a particular mutual fund, say, right, and some 35 lakhs is coming into your account. Now, left to themselves, the banks are happy not telling you because it's lying in the savings bank account and they get a lot of spread on it, right? But a good bank is one that will call you and say, you've got proceeds coming in. Here are the top 3 performing mutual funds over the last 5 years. Would you like me to move something into it? Would that work?
Yeah. That's what happens.
That's what happens.
That's what happens.
Right.
That's the, actually, proactive has become an expectation.
Right. We are coming to another, that's wonderful. If proactive is the norm, you've shifted the game goalpost, right? You've changed the whole thing and it becomes a hygiene factor. So you can't claim that I'm being proactive, but in the other people who are in the table, is there any proactivity possible in your business? Is what you have to look at. Give an example, yeah.
Actually in telecom industry, 40 to 50% of postpaid customers are on wrong plans.
Okay.
There are better plans available with the same operator.
Right.
And the telecom companies know about it. But the revenue loss is in thousands of crores.
Sure.
So they never proactively tell anyone.
Sure. And I know because recently, I mean, we had a chance to chat up with Airtel on something. We have this thing called My Plan.
Yeah.
So I decide how much on SMS, how much on voice, how much on data. It was there pretty much all along. They could have done it any time.
Yeah.
But you're right, it suited their convenience because you're paying 2,000 rupees a month and you're not using any of what you're eligible for. And the ones that you used up more, like data, you're paying for it. And therefore, it worked very well. Now, the whole thing goes back to, am I profit-centric, am I customer-centric? Right? And therefore, if there are some banks which actually allow you to tell the customer, proceeds are coming in, here are the 3 mutual funds, you are foregoing potential interest there because you're going to pay 3.5% to the guy who's got the money in the savings account, right? And you're going to charge the customer at 12, 13, 14%. So there is an opportunity you're losing. But if you're customer-centric, you would actually forego that because in the long run, you're hoping you'll do business. We get into other dimensions like ethics later. Yeah.
Actually, they say that customer satisfaction is not at any cost. It is only at a cost. So the company make a decision on that.
Right.
That how much customer satisfaction I want to afford.
Sure. It's interesting. The ladies will. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had one other example
Yes.
to share. In fact, I had one of my clients where they were not very happy with the quality of work they were doing, and I had to get on a weekly call with them, and I knew that I will be blown up with all issues.
What industry are we talking
We
about?
are into healthcare industry.
Okay.
So in fact, we proactively had a plan in place on how we are fixing the issues. I had how the training would work, how the QA will be aligned, kind of things. So when we got on the call, I took the initiative and I told, okay, I know that these are the problems we are into, and this is the plan. So this proactive communication helped me to gain the client confidence where they knew that, okay, I've understood where the problem is,
right.
what the fix I have. They understood that I already have a fix towards it, and that really helped.
Sure, sure. There are 2 things that helped you. Proactiveness is one. But even before that, if you actually said, I'm sorry, I screwed up, right? We apologize because there was obviously, we took the eye off the ball. We do have a plan in place. That appearing human is something that has incalculable value. And so just saying sorry, very often clients are willing to forgive. It's a human quality, right? We all know about the Volkswagen blow that has happened, right? How they cheated, and software industry obviously made money in the process. But what are they saying now? Listen, we are sorry, we screwed up. Here is $500. So in future, if there is anything that you need from Volkswagen, come back to us and you can encash this 500, subject to, asterisks, conditions apply. But what it means is, I'm sorry, I'm willing to take a financial rap for it, is what you're looking at.
So on this proactive customer care, there's two
Yeah.
aspects to it. One is you do something non-intrusive or you're doing something for the benefit of the customer, and then it becomes a norm and so on and so forth. The other one is you can monetize this and make it a new marketing opportunity, saying that I offer this proactive service, right? And then you monetize it and do it. But I think what's critical in all of this is that the customer knows it's proactive.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, generally in insurance or anything, till you use it, you don't have it. Right? But when the opportunity comes, if you're not getting the service to the quality you expected, then you have a problem. Like for us, as an example, if we do it with laptops and computers.
Okay.
Now, in a car, when you take service for a year, you take to the service station, they do stuff, and then you know that the car is smooth. Right? In a computer industry, you generally don't know whether your system is fine or not till
Right.
something breaks down.
Right.
But we have taken a different approach to that, saying, is the system working fast or slow? I'll call you every periodically, 3
Sure.
months or 4
Sure.
months or what have you.
Sure.
And then show you that my proactiveness is actually helping you become productive. There are 2 aspects to it. One is whether you want to monetize it, and secondly is how do you show that proactiveness to the customer,
Sure.
which is more important.
Sure. And that's a marketing opportunity. What is the downside of that? The entry barriers are very low. So if you say I'm being proactive and doing it, everybody becomes proactive and does it. So it's become the new norm,
Yes.
right? So that's the only thing. But the marketing mileage that you can gain is maximum. I remember many years ago, there used to be this ad for Coca-Cola, right? And I think Bing Crosby used to be the spokesperson for that. He'd come. And then there was one ad where he's sitting down on the chair and he's telling them, Pepsi is comparing themselves with us, Dr. Pepper's is comparing themselves with us, so there must be something in us, right? So the gold standard, so to speak. So if you're the first to be proactive, you can get some marketing mileage out of that. And it's a very interesting thing that if, that first line is very interesting when you look at it, If you're providing somebody something because they've asked for it, you waited for too long, right? Meaning proactive. Of course, all this is to be taken with a barrel of salt, but it gives you an idea that you need to move ahead of the customer's expectations and so on. Economists will tell you that in the long run, you can't sell anything at a profit because people will discover costs and you can't really make profit out of, you can't make super profits in any case. So more and more of the cost takeout is happening through the automation part, but in the customer service industry, there will never be a replacement of human beings totally. Right? But the question is, how do we make sure that we identify the parts which are repetitive and we can take out and do something else? So that's one with being proactive. This whole thing about smart machines, the example I gave with the car was one. But to me, when I say smart machine, it's also smart usage of, I'll give an example. Take Samsung as an example, right? They're getting a lot of customer complaints. So they come to the consulting company to ask for advice that we are getting a lot of this. The problem we are having is we are telling the customers what to do, they're not able to get it. Because there are so many features in that phone that if I ask that lady, press the start button, go to this, go to that, he or she is not able to do that. And they're saying, what do we do? So one simple technology solution that we found was, which now it's taken from the IT industry, but it's now prevalent in the mobile industry as well. You have a software which enables the call center to take care of your phone. Right? There's something called Smart Tutor. Any of you, Samsung I know does that. So there you are. So this was a consulting advice given that I'm trying to solve the problem and we're depending on self-service and it's not working because the capabilities of this machine is so much that the user doesn't understand and is not able to do. It's giving us a bad name. And therefore the solution was, can I have a program which they download? I can then take control, so to speak. They can take a look at it. So there was an elderly lady, she was facing a problem because the phone was losing its the charge very quickly. The battery was going down very quickly. And they were very surprised because they're less than 6 months old. And by using this, where you take charge, you take a look at everything, and you find there are so many of these memory resident programs and apps and so on, which are not necessary. They kept deleting all of that, and suddenly the battery usage went up. All because sitting where I was able to take charge, and that was made possible because of technology. So it just, sometimes you can use automation in a way that actually helps increase the customer's perception of what you're doing.
Two information here. One is
with less. In Indian terms, there is a very famous term called jugaad, which is somehow I piece things together and make them work. Sheer human ingenuity, but what do we now call it? In the West, the philosophy now is, how do I do more with less, right? So resource constraint strategy is a nice term we give to what otherwise we would have called jugaad, right? So very often, necessity is the mother of invention. So if in India I have less resources to throw out or money to throw out, and forces me to think of certain ways, good practices can be captured and taken away. And good ideas should never be the monopoly of one. I mean, that's the main thing with this. Increasingly, our understanding of the customers, especially patterns of usage, of buying and so on, can be done in the background, and then by exception, I report at various levels. And therefore, our ability to embed and take away is something that is happening a lot. And like I said, automobile example, industry example I gave you, it could be one for mobility as well. You have to look at how you do that in financial services and so on. That how can I embed technology and try and take away insights so that I can provide better customer support, customer service. So that's the whole thing. And increasingly, and you would have heard Anand Srinivasan, increasingly there's so much of data that is going around, right? With what we call big data, because it has videos, pictures. It's not just zeros and ones anymore. The complexity of data is what has gone up. And the challenge that you have is, how do I still make sense out of this mountain of data? And that's where the machines, the analysis and so on are becoming very useful. Any of you use any deep analytics in your business?
Yeah, we do.
Would you like to share?
Yeah, so, you talked about being proactive. So I think for us, big data is really taking us there in terms of being proactive. So we're now being able to study patterns of spends because a lot of payments, etc., start happening on the account. So probably on a Saturday, Sunday, when I know that my customer, a certain set of customers choose to do X kind of transactions, I can start pushing deals, offers to those set of customers around Friday evening, so that on Saturday when they go out, they know that these are the offers available to them from their organization and they can use them. So that's one use case that we're able to do. Some of the other use cases which have been in the industry for a while is, for example, checkbooks. So when customers write checks, we can track as to when the checks are getting exhausted, and so the customer doesn't have to order, and we can ship the checkbook straight away without the customer being able to order. So very small use cases, but yes, some of the stuff that we do.
No, that's the thing, that when a customer gets a new checkbook in the mail, when they still have 4 or 5 leaves left, is very nice. So the whole thing is, now you need to be a little careful because we get into data privacy issues here, right? How much, that's why in many websites you'll see none of the information you provide will be used for marketing purposes and so on, right? But the point is, while there is a thin line dividing privacy versus cute usage of the data, and you have to be on the right side of it, the fact is, today, thanks to the kind of computing power that we have, there's a lot of things that we're able to do. MD, for instance, a very avid outdoor man, as you know. So if he knows the next 5 days forecast in Ooty Kunur area, that decides whether he's going to take the cycle up there or not. It could never, can you imagine, virtually every nook and corner of the country today has been mapped and 5-day monthly forecasts are available. I don't know about the accuracy of those to the finest degree. I know the near-term forecast will be good, but that can be done only because of the sheer computing power that we have. And it's a good idea. These are things which you can happily use. You're not abusing it, you're using it. So you make use of all that inside.
Actually, Jet Airways does that very well. I travel quite a bit.
Yes.
So across India. And I don't know many locations. So I'm visiting a branch and I don't know, okay, I've gone to this branch, I need to reach the airport. So every time Jet Airways sends me a notification on my mobile saying, you need to start now to reach the airport in the next 1 hour.
Wow.
So this is awesome. I actually caught my flight in Chandigarh simply because I saw the notification. Otherwise, you know, you have a tendency to think that, I mean, in Bombay, it wouldn't matter even if you started 1 hour before.
Sure.
Somehow locations manage to reach you to the airport. But you know, strange places, and I travel quite a bit. So that is, I mean, that's why I always travel Jet Airways now, because it at least tells me when to start, from where.
How nice, how nice.
That's awesome. Actually, it was very eerie at first. You know, I used to have a chat with my digital product manager saying, how does Google know where I am? You know, they know everything. Whatever you do, where you are, which airport you checked in, which hotel you went to. So it maps, it tells you distance, it tells you what it is.
And it's Google doing it, not Jet. So you can travel other airlines.
No, but it comes from Jet Airways. So Jet has tied up with Jet is paying Google to give you the data.
But, you know,
so Jet is doing that as an effort. It's an effort. It doesn't come from Indigo, but it comes only when I take Jet.
Yeah.
That's
the
awesome.
Other part of debate we have in our organization today on being proactive is that we don't want the customer to think Big Brother is watching.
Sure, brilliant, brilliant.
At the end of it, I think privacy is a very sensitive issue for a customer, and you don't want to be doing proactive stuff at the cost of the customer getting worried that somebody is really peeking around all the time.
And there's an interesting one, maybe the choice of wording in that message.
Yeah.
We are fully aware that you are a committed professional and you will make it to the airport on time, but we just thought we'll tell you if you start now, you'll catch it in 1 hour. Right?
Oh, it doesn't say anything.
I'm just saying, if I were a wordsmith, I would do that because it takes away the thing about Big Brother is watching versus Big Sister is helping. That's a nice. And the point you made is valid, that Uber, your location gets fixed on the Google thing. I don't have to say I'm in Patel Ramareddy Road next to this because it's shown. Now Ola has access to it, Meru has access to it, they don't use it.
They don't use it.
And
so irritating. Oh God.
So
I moved to Uber just for that reason.
Sure.
Because you have to stop giving directions to these drivers where you are. And
you'd be surprised. I had a different experience this morning, but yeah, by and large. So the point is, it's available to everyone. The one who smartly captures that opportunity comes out the winner. And like I said, there's no entry barrier. You throw money at Google Maps, they're going to give that map to you as well. There's nothing proprietary about that, but usage of that. And it requires smart thinking. And if they were to do it for, say, platinum customers and gold customers only, then there is an incentive for you to fly more and get into those classes. So the ways of incentivizing customer behavior also through the customer service angle. Sales will be happy with that. We talked very briefly about this, rehumanizing care, because there was getting to be a feeling that this whole customer support business, right, are we moving towards automating it, taking the human element out of it. That's a fear that people always had. Because whether we like it or not, people still go to elderly people. I'm sure you have in-laws or grandfathers who would love to go to the bank branch on a Saturday morning. It's just part of their daily, Saturday routine. They just want to go there, smell that cup of coffee, strong South Indian coffee in the Nungambakam branch. It's how they grew up. And for them, taking that away is taking away a part of them. Right? But increasingly with the younger generation, which is on the go, far less sentimental. I would say they're practical, right? I won't blame them for it. Far less sentimental about many of those. These are the ways in which you're going to reach out to those customers. Being old brick and mortar is not going to help.
I also felt this as a consumer myself, and for my wedding anniversary, before my wife will wish me, HDFC has wished me, LIC has wished me, ICICI Prudential has wished me, and then my wife wishes me.
I would only be worried if you are wedded to HDFC and LIC more than your wife.
Has come to me from all these service life insurance providers.
That's a reminder for you to wish your wife.
No, and the thing is, the human psyche is what it is. So that little email which says many happy returns of the anniversary or whatever is, it's all it takes. All you have done is you've actually shoved it onto the cloud into an application. You don't even know. I have a chief executive friend who has done this who uses the app. So it sends out, very religiously sends out messages for your birthday and your anniversary. So one day I called him and said, hey, thanks for the wishes. He said, what wishes? So now it's embarrassing because he's actually proactively sent the wishes on the morning of the birthday and he is not aware because he had outsourced it. Right? So sometimes you just want to be a little alive to contraindications that may happen. So the whole thing is, there's a very interesting book called Zombie. There's a whole series of zombies, right? And the whole thing is, when we say zombie, it's like automated, right? It's second nature, you're not even thinking about it, and that's the whole thing. But increasingly, people are asking for a human option. So don't swing the pendulum completely to one side at the expense of the other, depending on the nature of industry you're in, is the only caution I would have. And especially, for instance, I'm a chief executive coach, and therefore a lot of my time is spent with people, understanding the problems, trying to iron out behavioral angularities, right? And therefore that empathy, that human quality, compassion, listening to them without interrupting. You really screwed up, didn't you? He's not come to you for the reinforcement of his screwing up. You are supposed to help him figure that out. So there is a certain quality which is still expected, and especially if you're in things like counseling, coaching, whatever, there is no substitute. You would never want a chief executive coach of an IBM Watson. You want a human being doing it for you. So some of them it fits, some of them it doesn't. GSPLM. A very interesting trend that is happening. You know Ramesh Srinivasan now, don't you? So you know about the works ago he started. So one very interesting thing that is happening is what we call as gamification. Has any of you heard of it?
Yeah.
Any of you using it?
Yes, we are about to.
About to use it. And the whole thing is, not that gamification means, you're playing the mobile games, but trying to make it a little lighter, little fun, but also effective too, right? One very interesting example, in fact, we didn't call it gamification at that time, but I was involved with Infosys. And the whole thing was, any of you in the IT industry will realize that if you're doing a large project, right, you possibly have 100 consultants working on it, project gets over in 12 months, and you're disbanding. You want to capture the knowledge of those 100 people that they've discovered about the work practices, the client and so on, capture it for posterity. And how many of us, after a year-long tiring project is over, want to sit back and give feedback about the nuances of the client you worked with? Unless you're a glutton for punishment, that's not going to be top of your list, right? But the challenge that Infosys faced was, how do I make sure that people actually part with the knowledge they've gained? Because they're going to move on to another project, but I have to continue supporting the customer. I need to understand. So we came up with a thought process. First of all, we either incentivize or punish people, right? That's the way you change human behavior for a long time. So we decided to use the incentivizing route. And so what we said is, as part of the business process, it is mandatory for you when a project is over to contribute to the knowledge management system, or KMS as you would call it. Mandatory. So there's no deviation. But if the quality of inputs that you gave and so on was felt by the manager to be of a good order, every one of the persons who contributed, who deposited into the knowledge repository, actually got what we called as KCU, knowledge currency units. So at the end of a project, I disband and I give you rich information. You give me 100 knowledge currency units. Now, why did the KCUs help? If I had 500 KCUs, I could actually go and buy an Infosys t-shirt. So I could actually encash the KCU for hard cash. Would you now feel incentivized to contribute your knowledge at the end of a project? And especially if you give rich texture, I might get 150, who knows, 200 KCUs. So you suddenly found what you dreaded was something you're looking forward to, because half a t-shirt was underwritten by your contributing, right? Gamification. So try and make a part of the system, incentivize them, but make it capturable, quantifiable, whole host. Some of our old friends from our PwC days have actually started a company. All they're going to do is gamification. And they've already got 5 clients doing beta and so on. So it's a very exciting space. You might want to try and look at how do you do this. When we talked of human, that's the same thing. And it's very interesting. Let me ask you a question here. If you think about, one of the metrics that we use when a new technology is being adopted is, how long does it take for, let's say, the first million users, first million units to be sold, first million hours of usage, whatever it is, right? If you were to look at television, if you were to look at computers, they all had their certain life. It took, maybe for the first million televisions, if you looked at it, was just 5-6 years. But if you looked at the first million two-wheelers, it was 8 years. First million cars, it was 15 years, because the price points became higher and higher. But if you looked at the time that it took for mobile phones to hit that mark, right? Fraction of what it did for a corresponding, let's say, computer, laptop, desktop, whatever you call it. What do you think the reason for mobile phones really taking off in India? People don't know how to use a computer, but they bought mobile phones by the tons. What do you think was that one large conversion factor? If you buy a computer, you need to know an operating system, keyboard, and of course you now have Devanagari script, so you can type in Hindi kind of thing, but you need literacy. In mobile phone, the reason I have a green button and a red button, green is go, red is stop. That is if you're not a driver in Bangalore, because red light means go, green means you can't anyway go. But by making it simple, without having literacy you're able to use, that technology takes off, right? And the reason for that is, of course, rudimentary element of the numbers, 0 through 9. But most importantly, it didn't require operating system. I could speak to my mother in Tamil. This device allowed me to speak to us in a language she and I understood. It wasn't a computer where I had to send a message in English and somebody translates. So just making it easy. Natural language is the best way to communicate with the masses, right? And therefore, a lot of research today is going on in voice recognition. Siri, of course, is an old technology. Most of us know it. But today, many of the IT majors are working on voice in terms of recognizing the vernacular, right? As you know, most of these, the more you keep speaking, they start understanding you better, because your tonality, inflection. Can you imagine if the same device had to listen to a Keralite and a Punjabi and a Bengali, the English you're trying to understand, right? Each of us is so accented, it becomes difficult, but machines are beginning to learn that. So voice is something voice recognition is something that's becoming more and more prevalent. So today, I was talking about my son being in US, and you talked about smart TV, somebody talked about. So he's just sitting there in his couch and he says, Netflix. So the TV comes on and it goes to Netflix. And then you have he and 2 roommates, so it has user ABC. He says, Wish, that's his name is Vishtruth, he calls himself Wish. So he says Wish, so it chooses the second user, because all the films that he likes are already stored. And then he says either 3, or he talks about the name of the film, and that starts playing. Now, how lazy can we get? Earlier, you had to use the remote at least. Much earlier, there was no remote, so you had to walk up to the television and press that. Today, you have a remote, but this couch potato actually has even obviated remote, because it's voice control. But look at the brilliance that literacy is taken out of the game. And if in India you want to penetrate to the masses, if it is something that is not linked to literacy, you have your $1 million waiting to be made. So just an interesting aside. One of the best ways, I asked you a question in the beginning, have you tried buying your own service? And the reason for that is ground reality. That's what customers are going through. The number of nested levels of an IVR, or the number of times they have to ask a shopkeeper before he shows your product, the number of times it changes hand across people because the level of complexity keeps getting escalated, the person is not able to solve, is frustrating. But the idea is to get to know ground reality. The important thing here is you can learn a lot from just by observing the customers, right? And I'm sure, how many of you have visited Apple stores? What's your experience there? Liz?
Usually good there. Very good customer service.
What is it about an Apple store that might appeal to you? The customer service angle, if you look at, what do you think appeals to you?
That no one wants to sell.
No one?
No one's trying to sell. It's like they're not there. So everything is on a display. You can just freely roam around the store.
Sure.
If you want them to demonstrate something, they demonstrate. But they will never come and ask you. They'll never say that, why don't you take this, or we have a great scheme going, or like, do you really want to buy?
Sure.
In fact,
Sure.
they don't bother at all. So
Do you know the difference between the two responses? Cultural. It's the same thing. No, I'll tell you why. Let me ask a question to the ladies, and the 50% of the class is almost ladies, which is, if you go into a sari shop and you like a couple and he shows you 50 saris, and if you don't buy any of them, what is the reaction you get from that storekeeper, from the person who is showing you the saris?
The body language is enough to understand you better get out.
So you feel unwelcome, right? You are asking me to show so many and you're not buying anything, because the expectation is they force you virtually, and very often we succumb to that, right? And especially an average Indian woman, not you guys are superstars, but they succumb to this human psychology. A person pulls a long face and grumpily pulls out another sari, you say, my God, I might as well buy one of these. So you don't make a choice based on what you like, the one you least hate, right? So in an Indian shop, there is that feeling, pervasive feeling that they're forcing you to buy something. Whereas here they're very unobtrusive, like Jeeves, right? They just materialize at your elbow when you want something to be demonstrated. They never make you feel unwelcome. They have a smile on their face when they're explaining. You don't feel you're overstayed your welcome, right? And in an atmosphere like that. So the whole point was they're trying to study where do people go to most, right? What are they looking for? What are they asking for? A feature? Are they asking for a price point? What are they asking for? So learning from your own. So stores, Apples have stores within a store, meaning within an Apple store, a little play area kind of thing where new products are displayed, you want to get a customer feedback. The best way to do it is through observation. So again, the takeaway from this, you can gain a lot just by observing. Okay. So that's the whole thing, looking at it. We're talking of the younger generation. A lot of the problems or a lot of the customer service is done just through the chat mode. How many of you chat with your friends? Just chat. Is that a very natural way for you to? What were you doing before chat happened?
Picking up the phone and speaking.
Phone.
Talking.
It wasn't that you suddenly started chatting because chat was there. You have substituted another medium, and chat is involved. I mean, you still got to type there. It's much, to my mind, it's much not tougher, but takes more effort to type than speak. And yet you find that comforting. Why is that?
Because you can do it when you want, whenever you want,
Right.
whenever at all. You
Right.
can't keep calling somebody 7 times a day because you have some brilliant ideas.
The chat-
But you can always ping.
Sure.
With chat, maybe I'm chatting with you.
Sorry, just 1 second, please.
Maybe I'm chatting with you, but
Yeah.
at the same time I can do.
You can do multiple things. I am a multi-processing woman. Let me show it to you. But that happens. Sorry, you were saying something.
It enables you to keep in touch with people you normally won't have. So
Sure.
it's a little less personal, but better than not keeping in touch at all.
Yeah, a WhatsApp kind of group, suddenly your entire people you have not seen for 35 years. Sorry, I'm not saying you're 35 years old. I'm just So the point is, suddenly a whole past life seems to catch up in a very positive way. Right? It's become, that's a new way. Now, the whole thing then is, if people are comfortable connecting with each other through a particular medium, what are we doing about servicing the customers on the same way? And if you're talking of servicing customers who are 55, 60 years old, are they going to adopt chat? Maybe not. But if 2/3 of the population is of an age where they are going to have the purchasing power, should you not be looking at putting that as a medium?
So in my family, most of the chatters and Facebook
Sure.
active members are above 50 and below 20.
So you're
I
the
have a very big family.
wonderful, wonderful. Well, that's nice.
Most of them have taken to technology because the grandchildren are
Sure,
elsewhere
sure.
or whatever, but all of them. So because of which they use all the apps. They now understand it's easy for some of us to recharge for them. They can use an
Oh, absolutely. I have a 82-year-old aunt in Coimbatore. She's the first one to respond to any WhatsApp.
Exactly.
You do a post or even a Facebook, like 82 years old, she learnt it last year and today she says, I know how I lived 81 years without this gadget. Right? But they take to it like duck to water. But not so much light away. The question is, what are you doing about it? How are you migrating the support and so on to that? And one of the other very interesting advantages why people prefer chat. Voice, of course, I can call and I can talk 7 times if I want. When I put the phone down, unless they've been illegally tapping your conversation, the voice is lost in the ether. Yes?
We have customers who are in a meeting and they chat with us. I'm from Make My Trip. They chat with us and they buy a travel plan during their meeting.
Wow.
During their meeting, and we buy it. And they make a payment everything.
One hell of a productive lady. But the point is, chat can get archived. Right? So if it's a voice saying, hey, how are you doing today? Is it raining in Bangalore? Is different from, can I look at a travel plan? Can I go to this part of Rajasthan in December? How cold is it? It's very useful material. You can archive it. So think about the power that chat provides when you're having customer-centric activities. You actually have.
Although we've had this chat process introduced around 2.5 years back.
Right. Where did you say?
2.5 years.
No, where? Tata Sky, okay.
Right. The number of users does not seem to increase.
Right.
Although our base is increasing.
Right.
It's a very static kind of a number. So I am very surprised as to why more and more people are not, opting for the non-voice mode.
Sure.
It's curious at our end, because what we are realizing is every new channel you open up for the customer, it's not as if traffic shifts.
Yeah, traffic
A
difference.
percentage,
I agree with you.
a percentage always does. And they are the people who are curious, willing to try a new gadget the first time.
What we are realizing is that there's a whole set of new people who start using that channel, which they were probably not using the other channels.
Sure,
in the
sure.
past.
And
Is multi-channel.
yes, thank you. We are in the last point and then we stop.
24/7. Initially, we used to have it only for 12 hours. When we made it 24/7, we kind of expected that the volume will get spread across the, time. And suddenly we realized that there are a lot more people chatting with us during the night. I assume these are the ones who are on the night shifts. So the volume never came down. In fact, it actually increased. And ever since it's been static. So
Sure. As with anything new that you try, there's only one word when you're trying anything new: have patience. You might be ahead of the curve, ahead of the time, but it's going to happen. That's the one that it helps you archive. And the last is virtual reality. And what this is saying, today there are devices available, you put on your Google Goggle, everything else, which actually in 3-dimensional you can take a look. Here's an example that you want, supposing you're trying to sell a package to the Andamans, right? And you show them the water, the coconut swaying and the beach resorts and whatever else. And one, of course, today you have a lot of those which are in the internet, and I can see sometimes they even give you little video clips to show, navigate to the room kind of thing. But if I'm actually able to virtually experience that, right, using the technology, seeing is believing, that's the bottom line. So people are more likely to be converts, especially fence sitters. So it goes back to using technology. So that's using the latest, like IKEA 2014 last year, they had a very interesting thing that you had an app, you could say, supposing I bought this double bed and I placed it here, what would it look like? So I didn't have to buy it, assemble it, and then find, my God, I shouldn't have bought a double bed, I should have bought half a bed, right? So actually they give you this experience. So using technology is the main thing. I just wanted to leave a sort of summary of all of that, right? Every customer is a multi-channel. I mentioned that in the beginning. So be alive that they're hitting you in many ways. For many, being proactive is important. Not feeling that they're getting service is really what they're moving towards. Social media is big, and the way that I need to use things is becoming big. For instance, today, if I get stuck with something on, let's say, how do I delete something I don't want or change my password in something, you go to YouTube and there is an idiot guide specifically directed for me. Okay, so very useful, because when I do it, I know how nice it would be if the YouTube was put into, let's say, your phone. So instead of my going to internet, looking at YouTube and finding out, it's already a content in the device because it's telling you how to use it. Are you with me? So that sort of thing is happening. The last we talked about was gamification. Sorry, the last one is important. A few years ago, suddenly senior HR people started getting onto the board of companies, right? Because people started becoming, very importantly, recognizing the human capital. And therefore, not many HR heads are on the board, but Lupin, for instance, has a president HR who sits on the board. That means you're pari passu with the CFO, the CEO, the director of marketing, a fantastic thing. How many of you are on the board of your company? How nice. You're getting there, because CEOs are beginning to realize that the side of the bread which is buttered is the same one that happens to be customer facing. All of you, satisfying your customers, delighting your customers, and you're just knocking on the doors of sitting at that high table. So your time too has come. I saw a little line from MD on the rules of the game. It's important to give the mileage to people who have influenced this presentation. So I've made sure that that is incorporated. So we are at 4.00, or a few minutes beyond that. I must apologize for a few minutes delay, but I've had my say. So if there is a quick comment or a question, I'll take that. Otherwise, I'll get out of here.
Well, thank you, Dash. It's amazing how this guy can keep talking.
You sound like my wife now.